Good morning. Welcome, Lighthouse teens. I am so glad to see you this morning. Guess what? I have news for you. Not only are we online every single Sunday, but every third Sunday, we are in person. What? Every third Sunday, 7th through 12th graders are in person at our North Campus. I can't wait to see you here. Never know what to expect with the Lighthouse team.
Stories are powerful. Just think about a movie you loved or series you binged that you felt connected to or drawn in by. Think about a time someone was telling a story about something that happened to them and you hung on to every word and detail. The thing about stories is they don't just entertain you or help you fall asleep. They pull you in and can help you get to know others better simply by hearing their experience. Stories make challenging topics clearer, big ideas easier to understand, and can even turn painful experiences into hopeful ones. No matter what the topic is, stories can help you see things in a new way and give you a fresh perspective. So today, we're going to do things a little differently and hear some stories from a few different people. Every person you're about to hear from is going to share about an experience they've had regarding race. Here's the thing about race. Race is one of the things we don't get to choose about our lives. It's something we're all born with, and it doesn't change. We also know that throughout history, and still today, there have been people who don't understand, accept, or even like people whose race is different than their own. This causes racial tension, which we're defining as the struggle or anger that exists between people or groups of different races. If you have social media or have ever watched the news, you've seen painful and devastating stories of people being treated unfairly. You've seen the anger, heard the conversations, or maybe have just felt confused by what the big deal is altogether. Today, hopefully after hearing these stories, you'll have a bigger picture and better idea of the things some people experience when it comes to race.
Hey, I'm Bobby, and when I was in the 8th grade, we had a school dance where the girls were supposed to ask the guys to go with them. Now, I hope that a particular girl would ask me to take her to the dance because I really liked her. And guess what? She asked me, and I said yes. And y'all, I was so excited that I got my outfit ready weeks in advance, like weeks. A few days after she asked me to the dance, my school had a skate party, and I met her dad for the first time. He introduced himself to me and we talked for a few minutes. After the skate party, the girl came up to me and told me that she couldn't go with me to the dance anymore. Y'all, I was so devastated that I didn't even go to the dance. I just stayed home and watched TV. And you know, I spent years wondering why things changed all of a sudden. So when I saw her a few years later, I asked her why she didn't go to the dance with me. And she told me her dad wouldn't let me take her to the dance because I'm Black. There was literally no other reason except the color of my skin. And at the time, I couldn't understand why. It was at that moment I started questioning so many things about myself. See, sometimes we don't always understand why people are unfair because of race. I couldn't understand why someone would do that to me. Like, will this be an issue I'll always deal with for the rest of my life?
Hi, my name is Charlie, and I grew up in the smallest town ever, on a farm in the middle of Illinois, and everyone, they look like me. In fact, I never met a person that didn't look like me until I went to college. That's pretty wild, right? I mean, my eyes were open to so many different cultures and stories, and I love learning from everyone. But then I became a mom, and I was very blessed to parent kids from different cultures, different races, and from different countries. It was a lot of fun, but that didn't mean it was always easy. Being a parent to kids from different races definitely had its challenges for me. There were some things that some of my kids faced that the others didn't. They would go to the same place with the same people, and their experiences would sometimes be completely different because of their race. I tried really hard to encourage each of my kids based on what they were going through, but sometimes it was just better for me just to listen to them and to hear their stories. See, racial tension looks different for everyone, but the effects of it are still very powerful. Working through our challenges as a family made me realize that everyone has their own unique story. But it also made me wonder, because I'm a white mom and my kids were different races from me and each other, would I ever truly understand what each of my kids were experiencing?
Stories are powerful because they allow us to see ourselves in them. We relate to them. In fact, maybe one of the stories you just heard sounded similar to something you've experienced. You might know what it's like to be treated in a way you shouldn't because of your race. Maybe you never thought about any of this and didn't think it was a big deal. Maybe you've seen someone being mistreated because of their race and even participated, but never thought about what it's like to be the other person. No matter where you fit into all of this, I wanted you to hear these stories so that you can know you are not alone in your experience. Everyone who shared their story today was uniquely different than anyone else who shared their story. And yet, we all have something in common. We all have a story. When it comes to race, sometimes our differences cause people to think of others as less than, or themselves as better than, which is known as bias. If we aren't careful, bias leads to treating others differently or poorly, and that's discrimination. So why is there racial tension? There's racial tension because bias, discrimination, and prejudice are real. Prejudice is an assumption or opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. When we think of others as less than because of their race, or if we treat others worse because of their race, it can cause incredible pain. It's not okay. It's not something God is okay with. It angers God and disappoints God. And yet, racial biases still exist in our world. We hear about it all the time. The truth is, together, we reflect the image of God. Our differences are evidence of a God who created every detail of each person with intentionality. Out of all the things God created, people, meaning you and me and every person you see, we're the ones chosen to reflect God's image, to represent God. That means every person is unique and every person is valued. In case we ever forget that message, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection reminds us. Jesus came to make wrong things right and show us the best way to live. He reminded us over and over in the way he treated people like him and people different from him that every person has incredible value. In a time when people accepted bias and racism or the unfair and unjust treatment of someone because of their race, Jesus literally changed everything. No matter who he was interacting with, he treated them with love and respect. Why? Because their differences weren't something to fear. They were a reminder of God's unique mark on every person. One of Jesus' followers, who also happened to be his brother, wrote about this very idea. Like Jesus, James grew up in a culture where some people were treated better than others. It was normal. Some people would even say it was right. It was so common, they may not have even noticed they were doing it. But after Jesus' death and resurrection, when James became a believer in Jesus, he wrote a letter to other Christians saying, "My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others? Showing favor is treating people in an unequal way. In other words, James is saying, how can you say you follow Jesus and treat some people like they're better than others? Jesus didn't do that. Being a Jesus follower means acting like Jesus and treating everyone the way Jesus did, like every person was valuable and had a God-given purpose to live out. When you live as if that's not true, your faith seems like it's not real." Then James says this, "Yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law as found in the scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law. That royal law James wrote about is part of what Jesus himself called the greatest or most important commandment. Jesus said a lot of important things and did a lot of important things, but the one thing he said mattered most was loving God, and equal to that, loving our neighbors as ourselves. Here, James points out that if we don't do that, if we favor some people over others, if we treat others like they matter less or more, it's a sin. It's not the way Jesus intended us to live. So, when it comes to living in a way that fights racial injustice, when it comes to living in a way that works toward a better world where everyone is seen and treated equally, we go back to the greatest commandment, to love others as we love ourselves, to love others as Jesus loves them. That is the part we play in fighting racial tension and racial injustice. As followers of Jesus, we believe that when you know who Jesus is, it changes everything. It changes how you see yourself, and it changes how you see everyone else. That means even if racial bias is everywhere in our world, even if it seems common, it can't be common with us. Our lives need to reflect Jesus' committed love for all people. No exceptions and no exclusions. That is what loving our neighbor and living like Jesus looks like. Remember, together we reflect the image of God. When God made mankind, he said this, "So God created mankind in his own image." That means every person, no matter their age, gender, or race, is valued, shows us something about God we wouldn't otherwise know, and should be treated with respect. Reflecting God's image means when people see you, they see more of who God is. But unfortunately, you and I both know that sometimes the world doesn't see it this way. Even though God made each of us to uniquely reflect that image, not all people act as if that's true. Some people treat people of other races like they don't belong. Some people use hurtful words or language towards people who don't look like them. Some people even act out in anger or even hate toward other races. And not only do those things cause more racial tension in our world, they're also not reflecting or respecting the image of God in each other. For those of you in the room who have been hurt or mistreated because of your race, you need to know that that treatment is not okay. The pain you feel is real, and it's awful. I'm so sorry that's how you and your community have been treated. We are committed to this being a safe space for you to talk about your experiences and to find people right here who are willing to walk with you and beside you. Maybe others of you haven't experienced any bias or poor treatment because of your race. Maybe, like the people James wrote to, you were unaware and never really noticed that having a bias was wrong. That's why it's so important to listen to people who are willing to share their stories like the ones we heard today, and to learn from them. Let's be clear, racism, discrimination, and biases that devalue others are sins and shouldn't exist. Yet, when we choose to intentionally listen to each other, we have the power to turn negative experiences with race into opportunities for learning, healing, and connection. Speaking of, let's go back to the stories.
If you've experienced unfair treatment because of your race like I did, I first want to say it's totally not okay, and I'm really sorry you experienced that. But remember, you have the right to stand up for yourself. If you don't know where to start, try talking to someone you trust. Let them know what you're experiencing and how you're feeling. And remember, you're amazing just the way God made you, and you weren't created to doubt who you are or feel less than anyone else.
Whether or not you have friendships with people from different races, remember that the goal is always to love everyone well, no matter what, and understand that our differences are what make us all unique. Actually, our differences are what make it possible to reflect the image of God. There's so much to know and learn about God, and getting to know other people help us to do that. Loving and listening to others can create amazing bonds that you never knew were possible. Getting to know people from races different than your own is such a beautiful experience because it helps us to see God by opening our eyes to the world around us. So open your eyes and then do your best to connect with others and support your friends any way that you can. It's so worth it when the end result is loving everyone well.
We know you have your own story, and so do all of your friends. That's why small groups are so important. We want you to connect with the people in your group to talk about your experiences, ask questions, and most importantly, to have a leader who is for you and loves you deeply. Remember, as you go to groups today, you have a safe place to process as we all figure out how to be more like Jesus together. Today, hopefully after hearing these stories, you'll have a bigger picture and better idea of the things some people experience when it comes to race.